not often that news from India even mentions the U.S. state of West Virginia where I currently reside, but in August of 2025, the India Times ran an article about the Devon family who'd come from New York to West Virginia and vanished for an entire week. Sadly, the article was being published because the Devons had finally been found dead in their car. They drove off a cliff along Big Wheeling Creek Road in Marshall County, not far from the state's western border. Their Indian heritage is relevant to this video because of that road and the place where it leads, which is also our destination today, New Vrindavan and the Hare Krishna Palace of Gold. Instead of me telling you about that road, I'll lean on a few paragraphs from this book written by a Hare Krishna who's currently serving life in prison without parole for the murders of 2 other New Vrindavan members.
The road, abruptly bending away from view in each direction along steep, wooded mountain ridges. The road seeming alive, moving, twisting and heaving, then curving and curling back on itself, scarcely wide enough for 2 autos to pass each other. This, the very road you once excitedly walked up so many years ago, searching as you were for a new way of life, for answers to all of your many questions. Further down, just around another bend and rising up out of the mist, curious travelers are stunned to observe an ornately crafted golden dome. This, the incomparable, inescapable reminder of your life's true mission. You utter a silent, solemn prayer, mentally offering your respects. Srila Prabhupada's Palace.
I'm Kendall, this is Jolene, and you're watching Moto Appalachia Discovery. I know people probably want me to cover the murders and child abuse that took place back in the 80s at New Vrindavan, but let me say that while that story is fascinating, I don't want to characterize the Krishna movement or any other group of people by their absolute worst moments or individuals. And as the lead officer investigating the crimes himself said, the world would be a much better place if everyone followed the tenets of the Hare Krishna movement. But let me make a couple of quick recommendations for those interested in the seedy side of the story. Firstly, if you really want to delve into the nitty-gritty true crime elements of the Palace of Gold, this is the book you need to read, Monkey on a Stick. The name comes from a practice in India. When a monkey stole fruit or other food from a farm, the farmers would sometimes kill the monkey, then impale their rotting body on a pike as a warning to all the other monkeys looking for a quick and easy meal. This book is easily the most comprehensive coverage of the darker history of New Vrindavan, and it might also be the best-cited true crime book I've ever read. The one thing this book doesn't really do well is explain Hindu or Hare Krishna beliefs. You won't walk away from this understanding the religion much better, but you will read one of the most horrifying murder scenes ever described in Chapter 1. If you still want more, try 100 Monkeyz, written by the so-called enforcer or murderer of the community. It's a surprisingly well-written vignette of the horrors he witnessed and participated in during the Vietnam War, his religious awakening with the Hare Krishnas, and more. If you ain't the read and type, I recommend a documentary streaming on Peacock channel, Krishna's, Guru's Karma Murder.
It's called the Hare Krishna movement. A colorful group, often seen dancing and chanting in the streets.
There are 2 worlds, the material world and the spiritual world.
You have these young, immature people suddenly acquiring this absolute power over other human beings.
It's a whodunit. Why did this guy get shot? And he's connected to the Krishnas in West Virginia.
I promised that I would stay for 6 months and didn't get out for 11 years.
This covers the story pretty well by talking to people who were there, including a narrative arc involving the son of Charles St. Denis, the Chapter 1 murder victim. It boils things down to a few main characters and plot points and wraps up with a satisfying ending. Okay, crime stuff aside, let's ride.
Moto Appalachia Discovery has one rule: no riding interstates. Interstates are for people trying to get somewhere rather than trying to experience a place. As it happened, I started this trip from kind of a weird spot and ended up riding the least maintained roads early on. While you're taking a look at that, let me give you the 2-minute history of how a Hindu temple ended up in the middle of nowhere, Appalachia. Prabhupada, the founder of the Hare Krishna movement, came to New York in 1965 at the age of 69 to fulfill the directive of his own spiritual teacher to spread Krishna consciousness. He came with $7 and a stack of spiritual books, not knowing a single person. But 1960s American culture was ripe for Eastern philosophy to take hold, and he quickly began gaining followers. It didn't hurt that the Beatles were fans and even recorded a song containing the Hare Krishna chant. And popularity wasn't just growing in New York. In the last decade of Prabhupada's life, Hare Krishna temples and communes sprang up along both coasts and in several countries across the globe. Prabhupada's message of a personal God and practical ways to draw closer to God was resonating. As this Palace of Gold, a tribute to Prabhupada at the New Vrindavan commune, was being built, he was traveling a great deal between India and the various growing temples around the world, not living at New Vrindavan. The community was founded and overseen by one of his earliest followers, Keith Ham, known by his religious name Kirtanananda. People who knew him describe Keith as a prideful and manipulative person, masking Machiavellian ambitions behind a spiritual facade. Nevertheless, he was a key organizer of the project to build the Palace of Gold to honor his guru. When Prabhupada died in 1977, Keith took advantage of conflicting and confusing succession plans to usurp complete power of New Vrindavan. That's when real trouble started. But I've told you where you can learn more about that. The New York Times called the palace America's Taj Mahal. CNN called it one of the 8 religious wonders in the country. And the palace has also made its way into some weird pop culture moments. In the video game Fallout 76, which largely takes place in a post-apocalyptic West Virginia hellscape, the palace is embellished into a map location called the Palace of the Winding Path. Consider that most of this palace was designed and built by creative, hard-working, but unpaid hippies in a rural area who had no idea what they were doing, at least at the outset. There's handcrafted stained glass, crystal, gold leaf, teak wood carving. It is beautiful. They learned how to construct this place as they built it, and in my book, that makes its inner beauty an even greater architectural achievement.
Unfortunately, I can't show you inside the palace. There are daily tours, but cameras aren't allowed. Suffice to say, it is worth the price of admission, if only to wonder at the strangeness of its existence in the mountains of Appalachia.
What I can show you is the temple where the Hare Krishnas still perform their services today. There's no cost, and if you're kind enough to take your shoes off at the door, you can walk around and take a look.
The temple is lovely, but the palace is gorgeous, or at least it's gorgeous on the inside. Outside, the vibe feels a little different.
There are two signs at the entryway to the Palace of Gold. The first is this one, and the second is this one. A keen observer might note that this is a rather permanent-looking sign, and what's more, it's covered in years of rust. That's because in 2011, the palace looked like this, and still does, in marketing materials. But that year, it began a supposed $4 million renovation project. But by my calendar, it's 2025, and these renovations are still going on 14 years later. The palace still boasts a beautiful rose garden that's lovely in bloom, but the gold-accented roof caps that once formed the very silhouette of the palace are now lying around the building in pieces. Ugly scaffolding has become a seemingly permanent addition to the building. Crumbling stone stairways are taped off to public use out of safety concerns. Some paint is wearing and wood is crumbling. The meaning and community for Hare Krishnas and Hindus around the world is still there. That's why the Devans were headed there. But the place itself is beginning to feel like a relic of history. One New Vrindavan resident told me that during a conversation with another member about the situation, the man told him, quote, "Just leave it. People visit ruins all the time." I certainly do, and in this case, I recommend these ruins to you.
For the camping this trip, Jolene and I stayed at Ryerson Station State Park in Pennsylvania, where I immediately contracted Lyme disease. Good campground, excellent restroom facilities, but remember to check yourself for ticks, folks, because that is a neurodegenerative disease. I caught it in time with powerful antibiotics, but don't get caught slipping on Lyme. That's all for this trip. Tune in next time, maybe for shooting guns in the backwoods.